Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Kidlot44. Happy New Year. In this commentary, I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch, why I think it's going to be a great console, why I think the portability factor, the hybrid factor of it being a portable console and a home console, why I think that was a really smart move by Nintendo. I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about why I think the Nintendo Switch is going to be a successful console, a lot more successful, of course, than what the Wii U was in terms of the success that it reached. I want to get all this information and all my kind of opinions out to you guys. Today is the 8th right now. I know we have on the 12th the big reveal of all the super important details of the Nintendo Switch. We'll probably see, you know, a couple of games, a price point, all the really big details that everyone wants to know. So before that actually happens, I want to get my own opinions out on the Nintendo Switch in this commentary. Before I do that, let's go back into the past a bit and let's talk about the Wii U for a second. Let's talk about why the Wii U was a failure. You know, just in general, I think almost it's kind of a universal thought in the gaming community that the Wii U was a failure of a console. It was literally the worst console that Nintendo ever put out. It was a stark contrast to the success of the Wii, and there's a lot of reasons why the Wii U was a failure. I won't go into every single one of them. I'll just go into the ones that I thought were most important. Number one was the game releases. There were a lot of game droughts. The game releases on the Wii U were very intermittent, a lot of time gaps between quality games that Nintendo gamers wanted to play, and of course this was a big problem. As you know, the lifeblood of a console, of course, is being able to play awesome games. You know, when you look over, when I look over my shoulder onto the other side of the field, you see Xbox One and PS4. They have loads of games that come out every single month, and I'm willing to bet that there's at least one quality game, one AAA title that comes out every single month, and that's a pretty healthy amount of games to play on those consoles. You know, the gamers are happy over there. On Wii U is a completely different story. Like I said, a lot of game droughts, and it almost culminated into a really ugly disaster in 2016, because if you think about it, last year, think of the major titles that were released for the Nintendo Wii U last year. We had Star Fox. We also had Paper Mario, so really only 2 titles. Can you believe that? 2 titles only for the Wii U last year. That just spells a complete disaster. You're not gonna, have a successful console if you don't make games for it, right? So pretty much Nintendo kind of gave up on the Wii U, and now of course they're focusing all their efforts on the Nintendo Switch. That's understandable, but this kind of game drought phenomenon also happened in the previous years as well, 2015 and going back. I mean, there's a lot of great first-party Nintendo games, right? We have, new IPs like Splatoon, we have Super Mario Maker, all quality titles. The Mario Kart this year, or this console generation, was fantastic. So Smash Brothers was also really good. So there's a lot of good games coming from Nintendo, but if there's only one source, Nintendo, there's no third parties because, third parties really didn't have an opportunity to make revenue. This console was a lot weaker than the other consoles, of course, so it's really hard to justify making a console port specifically for the Wii U, especially if it doesn't sell, because, third parties aren't going to have any revenue, they're not going to make any money on this console. And so because of the fact that it was only Nintendo, no third parties, Nintendo was kind of limited as well. They have to make their 3DS games and so on and so forth. Whatever the reason was, not a lot of games, and that was a really huge weakness for Wii U, and that's a really big factor on why the console failed. The next and final reason why I think the Wii U failed, the big other reason why the Wii U failed, was the price. But the price was also related to the tablet controller, so I'll blame it all on the tablet controller. So you have this tablet controller, and to be honest, not a lot of games on the Nintendo Wii U really utilize this tablet controller. Only one, I can only think of one, which is Super Mario Maker, a perfect game to have a tablet controller, of course, because you want to make your own levels, and you have this stylus drag and drop, and you put all the level elements and course elements and so on and so forth. You build your level with the gamepad, and that made a lot of sense. Other games, a lot of the times, it was just kind of this split screen sort of thing. You can mirror what's on your TV onto your gamepad. I mean, that's not really that special, and a lot of the times, it was just really gimmicky, just kind of using your fingers as extra virtual buttons and so on and so forth. It wasn't really intuitive. It wasn't really it didn't really help the console a lot. And like I said, the gamepad wasn't utilized really well on many games, so it was kind of a failure. It was kind of a waste to have a tablet controller that really didn't do anything to enhance the gaming experience. So you have this tablet controller, it's really expensive relative to the console, so you have to make the console weaker, and of course that's going to deter third parties from coming over. They don't want to develop on a weaker console, so now your console is weaker, and now that's also to keep the price relatively small. But again, even with the with the tablet and the weaker console, this thing was still about $300 to $350 depending on what kind of model you got, either the basic or the deluxe. So the tablet controller really was like a negative domino effect that ruined a lot of things about it. It made the console weaker. It was not really utilized well. It deterred third parties from making games on this. And so that was another reason why I think that the Wii U failed, was the controller. You know, when you compare it to the Wii remote, think of last generation with the Wii. The Wii was an awesome success story. It was very appealing. Let's use that word, appealing and revolutionary. It got a lot of casual gamers to play games again in different ways with motion controls, you know, swinging around your remote and so on and so forth. That was cool, and you saw in the commercials, like, you know, gamers were really up on their feet and they were active. Now you have the Gamepad, and it's not really as appealing as the Wii, and it's really hard to market as well. It's really hard to kind of market this console as fun, you know, to make it seem as fun as the Wii was. And so all these reasons combined, I think the Gamepad was a really, really, really bad decision. It's great for, you know, going on the web browser pretty much, right? You know, I use the web browser a lot on the Wii U Gamepad. But other than that, in terms of gaming, a complete double thumbs down. I think, again, really big reason that contributed to the Wii U's failure. Now, let's go on to Switch. Now I want to talk about Switch and why I think it's a lot better than the Wii U. And I think, you know, Nintendo is never going to compete with the other consoles in terms of a power basis. They've kind of strayed away from that with the Wii. They can't compete anymore. They've kind of already alienated their super hardcore gamers back in the day, like the SNES days and maybe even the GameCube days. Those guys, if they're still in gaming, they probably moved on to the other competition, right? So Nintendo is always going to have some sort of gimmick to hook other casual type gamers into their platform. So I think the Switch idea is really smart, and it's a lot smarter and has a lot more to offer than the Gamepad. So the gimmick this time around is that your console is now a handheld console as well that you can take on the go. And so that is really meaningful. This is gonna, you know, in some sense try to compete with mobile gaming. I think everybody benefits by having the ability to play your core console games, your adventure games like Zelda, on a bus, on a plane, you know, while you're waiting at the park or something like that during your lunch break. And to have a full kind of console experience with the controller and the graphics and so on and so forth. I know it's weaker when it's only by itself, but just to be able to play your, you know, a real legit console game on a nice little slick tablet, that's a very nice value proposition, especially when you compare it to your Android phone or your iPhone, where you kind of get really shallow games. Now you're having some real meaningful games, like, you know, they were showing Skyrim on this thing, and can you imagine Skyrim on the go? Something like that. That's a really, I would say, good opportunity, decent opportunity. I think that people would actually like that and would be swayed enough to want to get a Nintendo Switch to be able to do stuff like that. I certainly would. I think I find mobile gaming, well, console mobile gaming, so to speak, I find that really appealing. So that's why I think the Nintendo Switch has a way better advantage than the Wii U had. It's just a lot better. The value proposition and the quote-unquote gimmick is a lot better this time around. They also have different, I guess, different kind of things in their advantage as well with Nintendo. Like, two advantages that I can think of are now they have mobile games, right? So now Nintendo is developing mobile games for iPhone and Android, and those kind of serve as advertisements for their core console games. And we've kind of already seen this phenomenon happen with Pokemon, for example. Pokemon Go, as you know, had millions of players last year playing the game, and that definitely helped out with the sales of Pokemon Sun and Moon. I think Sun and Moon was the most pre-ordered game, and they broke a lot of records in terms of sales with Sun and Moon, and you can attribute a lot of that success just to Pokemon Go. You can see the same thing with Mario, maybe same thing in the future with Fire Emblem and things like that. I think it's a really smart strategy, and they said they wanted to have at least 3 games per year for mobile. I think it's a really smart strategy to get a lot of people aware of their games by having like this mobile game, maybe free to play, as sort of an advertisement for their core console games. That's one advantage they have. The next advantage that they have as well is the ability to only focus on one console. Before, you had Wii U, you had 3DS, you had 2 pillars, and you had to split split your development efforts, your personnel, into two different categories, right? One person making a Wii U game and this other person making a 3DS game. Now, with this Switch, you know, who knows how long they're going to support the 3DS, but eventually that console, it's like 6 years old, it's going to die eventually. And so when it does, now they have the ability only to focus on this one platform. So they don't have to, they're not going to waste their time anymore, right? Making Super Mario Maker for Wii U and then have next year, right, like they've done with last year in 2016, where they also made a 3DS version of Super Mario Maker. Same thing with Yoshi's Woolly World and a bunch of different games. They're not going to do this whole let's make two different versions for each console. Now they can focus completely on one console, on the Nintendo Switch, and theoretically, if you think about it, that should double their output of games, right? Because now they're only going to be focusing on one system. That means that you should be able to make twice as many games. And if they just doubled their amount of games that they had for Wii U, let's say, for example, I think everybody would be happy and nobody would be complaining about the lack of games on the Nintendo Wii U. Theoretically, they should be able to double their game output with the Switch, so hopefully we see something like that happen. But again, it is really a big advantage for them only to focus on one console as opposed to splitting their development efforts. So those are my thoughts. Those are the advantages why I think it's different this time around than maybe, you know, whatever, 4 years ago in 2012 when the Wii U came out. So I think with all these reasons combined, I think the Nintendo Switch is going to be a successful console. Maybe not as successful as the Wii was, but still a lot farther, more successful, of course, than what the Wii U was. So that's my commentary. We'll see all the information in January 12th. My name is Killot404, and have a good day. Peace. I'm out.